Welcome to Daddy's Podcast.
This is the Redefining Plastics Podcast. Welcome to the Redefining Plastics Podcast. My name's Justin Riney. We've got our second repeat guest, Dr. Chris DeArmitt. Dr. Chris DeArmitt and I are on similar crusades, I guess, on LinkedIn to fight against misinformation. And he's got a new book coming out. So wanted to bring him back on to talk about the new book. So Dr. DeArmitt, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Justin. I really appreciate the chance to talk about it. It's a funny thing these days. You have the chance between being popular and being right. So for me, it's more important to be right about something. I'm a scientist, so I care about what's true. I care less about whether people want to hear the message or not. So I'm grateful for people like you who do think it's important to start with stuff that's factually accurate and then move on from there and make wise choices. So,
yeah, facts are. I'm going back and forth with some people in my day job trying to put together an op-ed to challenge the plastics industry and changing our approach and how we deal with the anti-plastics narrative.
Yes.
And what you're doing with the Plastics Research Council, I think, is kind of in that same vein, but it's being more proactive and stop just being reactive, wait until there's a negative news story and then send out a press release pointing out how it's wrong, but actually changing the narrative, having a discussion with people. And facts are great, but as you know, facts don't really matter to a lot of people that we're talking to on a daily basis, which is it's a real challenge. It really is.
There's a few things going on there. It's a lot easier to just read a headline and believe that, something sensational. That's what most people do. And what I've been disappointed in is the plastics industry and even our trade associations have really done nothing. And in many cases, we've fallen for the narrative. So I hear even heads of big plastics companies talking about plastic pollution when scientists have studied this so-called pollution and found out it's actually litter, right? And litter is not caused by materials or companies, it's caused by people. And once you know that, the solutions are education, deposits, and fines. So that's an example of where I'm a problem solver. That's my day job. This is not my day job. It's my day job is actually being a scientist and solving problems. And I know that as soon as you actually identify the problem properly, then the solution becomes obvious. Once you realize that it's scientifically proven that people cause litter, then the solutions that work are known. So that's kind of a real disappointment that the solutions are known, the facts are known, and even the trade associations and the companies are kind of falling for this false narrative. And hopefully with your work and my work, we can help to open people's eyes and make some progress.
Yeah, I hope. It seems like we're getting some traction. Like, obviously, you've got a pretty large follower count on LinkedIn, and you get a lot of eyeballs on your message. And I constantly see the anti-plastics detractors talking about how nothing you say matters because you're all bought and paid for by the plastics industry. What would you say to that?
Well, I call them out. I say that's defamation and it's a lie. It's on my website that I've read 5,000 studies unfunded. And so then for somebody to be so lazy as to try and dismiss 5,000 hours of a top scientist's work just by proclaiming outright lies, that's really unacceptable. So when they've done nothing themselves, right, they're sitting in their chair with a bunch of Doritos and a Pepsi and telling me that I'm full of it. It's like, yeah, you might want to get a grip of yourself and get your ego in check. It's
you got a lot of keyboard warriors.
Yeah, that's right. Around. And it's a lot easier to pretend to be virtuous than it is to actually be virtuous, right? To actually be virtuous, you have to put in the work and know what's true and then fight for it and go through some pain and some discomfort, which I certainly have done. Whereas these people who hiding behind their keyboard, slurring other people, it's really disappointing. You mentioned LinkedIn. I had 1.5 million views on LinkedIn, 1.5 million impressions last year, which is, I heard, a lot for a private account. That's more than
it is.
Apparently most companies have. And then somebody else said that there's a thing where you can type LinkedIn/sales/SSI, which tells you your sales index or something. And apparently I'm in the top 1% for that. So I'd never even heard of that until somebody gave me that tip last week. And so, yeah, making an impact there. And then also, as you know, the first book was free and the second one's free. So people are always like, well, he's trying to sell a book. It's like, no, I spent thousands of hours unpaid and then shared all the science for free. And I'm on your podcast for free and the radio for free, newspapers for free, TV for free, all that stuff. So, it's important that somebody shows the facts to the few people who actually care about such things these days.
Yeah. There's such a lack. There's a scientific illiteracy in the U.S. specifically right now, because that's where I am. That's where you're working out of, and that seems to be the loudest pocket of LinkedIn anti-plastics people. Yeah, but it's shocking to me. And what's also interesting to me is the amount of people that are anti-plastics that are in the paper industry.
Yeah, the metal industry.
They have a vested interest in getting rid of plastic so they can make some more money.
I actually cover that in the new book. It talks about who's lying to us and why. I mean, who's funding them and why are they telling these lies? And you mentioned pro-plastic, anti-plastic, and as you know, I try to never be pro-plastic. The whole thing, for me, if you were to offer me a PET bottle of Coke or Pepsi, or a can or a glass bottle, I would pick the glass bottle or the can every time. I just like the feel in my hand. I'm not pro-plastic. I just don't want people to make choices based on stuff that's not true. If you want to pick glass or metal or paper because you like the feel of it, you like the look of it, it feels good to you, and you want to, that's the ironic thing, you end up paying more for it too. So most people are making choices that make things much worse, 4 times more waste, 3 times more greenhouse gas, and 2 times more fossil fuel to make these other materials. And they cost more because of that. But if you want to pay more for those things, and I do that too, do it. But don't do it because you were lied to. That's the big thing behind the new book. Make choices based on having the information in front of you. And then we're all grown up, so we can make the choices we want to make.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
you're going to, thank you for sharing the advanced copy, by the way. I read through it over the weekend. Shattering the Plastics Illusion. That's the new book. It's highly informative, as was the first, and you're scheduled to publish on Earth Day. Are you specifically trolling environmental NGOs at this point with the published date?
I'm not. The book was ready, and then people said, well, you can't just put it out there. You have to have a build up to it, right? You have to build some anticipation. You have to put up posts and tell them the book's coming. I'm not a marketing guy. I don't know how to do that. And they're like, you got to hire somebody. I'm like, I don't know a book publicist, right? So I knew that A, it was ready and I wanted to get it out, but B, I couldn't put it out without some kind of fanfare. So I thought, well, what's a reasonable amount of time? What's too short that I can't get any message out, and too long that I'm just going to be sitting here on top of a book, which should be out there helping people. So that's how I came up with it. When somebody said Earth Day is coming up, I'm like, all right, that's my excuse to have a day to release this. And anyone who really cares about the environment will look at it and know the facts. And if they're really smart, they'll change their mind.
Yeah. That's always a debatable point.
Yeah, that's right.
They're even willing to have the discussion or the debate. To most people, this is settled that plastics are bad. We got to get rid of plastics, and they're not going to take the time to look at your rebuttals to the credit card a week of microplastics or the nets in the ocean rather than plastic bags. Like how many miles you had to go, or kilometers, I think is the way you had the.
Yeah, you have to sail 100,000 miles. That's 4 times around the planet to find one piece of plastic bag in a net. It's an actual experiment that was done, sailing millions and millions of miles, and they're telling us the turtles are choking on them. It's just complete fiction. But
and then I saw the retraction. I think it was a BBC story that you had highlighted, where there was a picture. It was obviously a Photoshop picture of a turtle with a plastic bag, and then they had to take that back and they put a fish in a net, which is more realistic.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I said, this is a Photoshopped image. Here's the original without the bag. Please update this because you're misleading people. And to their credit, they actually updated it and apologized. And I did the same with CNET. There was an article recently that we eat a credit card of plastic a week, which has been debunked again and again and again. That's just nonsense. That would take 20,000 years to do. And then USA Today also covered a thing about plastic pipe, which was just made up by a company that's paid to attack plastics. They published an update and said, we were misled. This was not correct. And so I'm hoping that in future, journalists come to proper scientists and get the other side of the story. And you mentioned the council as well, and that's important because I'm not like one lone voice, right? One crazy scientist who's saying the opposite to everyone else. I've read thousands of studies, and imagine I'd gone to find those studies and they just weren't there, right? Then I would have no case. I'm reading thousands and thousands of studies which are peer-reviewed from all around the world, and that's the evidence I show. And I copy and paste from the study, right? So there's no spin on it. And then I have professors from all around the world read it and make sure it's right. So the launch of the new book, Shattering the Plastics Illusion, if you just type that into Google, you'll find the launch page for the free book. And there's endorsements from professors from all around the world saying, yeah, this is the real deal. And they've put their names next to it. And I'm really proud of that. Imagine from my point of view, right? It's easy to attack somebody. Imagine you're me, you read all this stuff, you write a book and you send it to some of the most respected scientists in the world. And they say, this is garbage. Right? Imagine they said that, which is totally possible. Imagine it was wrong. I would be ashamed, right? I'm a fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry. I'm a fellow of the Institute for Materials, Minerals and Mining, right? I'm a respected scientist. I would be humiliated and ashamed to spread misinformation. And that's why I have to make sure that this stuff is right before I would share it with any of the people that I know, any of the people that I respect around the world. So that's something that I'm very proud of, that this book it can't be undermined. It's peer reviewed. It's endorsed by top professors. And there's no way that some NGO they're going to say it anyway, but there's no way that anyone would have any credibility saying that this is like some outlier guy, a lone wolf who has a contrarian opinion, because that's just not the case.
Well, it's not going to stop them from saying
No, sure, they'll say it.
As you know,
that's why
they are going to continue to say it.
That's right. Like you said, be proactive, because once you're fighting it, let's say I launched the book without any of that stuff, and then they say this is some lunatic who doesn't have any supporters, then it would be very hard to fight back against that. And that's why it's all there on launch day.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Plastics Paradox, that was your first book.
Yeah.
That's been out for 4 years now?
5 years, yeah. I wrote it because my kids were lied to at school. They were told plastics don't degrade, yeah.
And it's been shared widely. And I've seen copies of it in different places that I've gone. And I know you mentioned in the intro to the new book that it was sent to politicians in the U.S. and in Canada.
Yeah.
And it makes it easy to do that when it's free, right?
Yeah.
It's on the website.
Who knows if our politicians can read, but they got copies of it anyway.
Did you have any inkling of a thought of possibly trying to make some money on this one?
On this book? Was it? No.
Yeah.
No. It didn't feel right. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to put it really, but everyone's trying to get money from you, right? If you look at Greenpeace, or any of these ones, they have some shocking claim right next to a big donate now button. And it just looks so cheesy, and it's so transparent what they're trying to do. They're trying to tell you anything that even their own former president said they just tell lies for donations. And so I didn't want to be in that game of saying, here's my book and pay for it. It felt better just to give it away. I can't give away the Amazon version, which will come, the print copy, because, I'm not rich. I can't afford to be giving away books that cost money. And I'm working, as you know, unfunded, so I can't afford to do that. And plus, it's available for free electronically. So there's no real reason that somebody would need a print copy unless they're just old fashioned and that's what they want. And I can't stop them from ordering it.
Yeah, I do like the feeling of an actual book.
Me too.
I think in this case, it makes it much easier to get the message out there. And really, that's what the industry needs more than anything. We need voices. We need positive narratives. And not just made up positive narratives either.
Right.
Facts.
Right.
We need facts, and we need to stand behind them. I think my biggest issue has been that it seems to me, and this is, feel free to disagree with everything I'm about to say here, but it seems to me like the science isn't really moving the needle in this discussion because people either aren't equipped to understand the science angle of it, or they're predisposed to disagree with anything that goes against their confirmation bias that plastics are bad.
Yeah, so, that's it. A lot of people are unreachable. And that's a shame. And as you said, part of it's education. A lot of the things we see on the internet, people with a science background or people who even paid attention in science class would be able to see through it immediately. And that was the thing recently. We have a spoonful of plastic in our brain. Who is so stupid as to believe that? even if you're not a scientist, that is just dumb. I mean, you should hear that. An alarm bell should be going off. Your spider sense should be tingling and just say, that is just BS. And by that, I mean bad science, of course. I mean, and sure enough, it's been debunked again and again and again. I debunked it a year before it was even released officially, before the final version came out. And it still got on breakfast TV and this and that and the other. And these clowns are out there talking about this thing. And, you know, it's just really appalling that so many people are unprepared to engage their brains. They don't seem to have any feeling for what's true and what isn't true, any information filter. And and the people I'm most disappointed in, I think, to some extent, are people in our own industry. I mean, there's going to be countless people from our own companies, and I won't mention names, but they're the ones that everyone knows. And these people are going to go to Inc. 5.2 and talk about an ocean plastic crisis that doesn't even exist. If you check the science, there is no ocean choking in plastic. It was completely made up in an old paper where somebody sat down and made up the guess that there's 10 million tons going into the ocean. It was literally a guess with zero data behind it. And everyone's still quoting that. They're flying around the world, having big meetings, talking about this emergency that simply does not exist according to millions of miles sailed over decades and study after study after study. And so that's really unfortunate that even the people who've got sustainability in their title, they're paid $150K to know this stuff, and they're too lazy to read the book. So now the second book's out. It has really tons of evidence. I really went overboard. This is the opposite of cherry picking. This is like where you take the whole freaking orchard and put it in a book. So, so there's got tons and tons of data in there, and anybody who considers themselves to be in this space really should, take a look at it. And even if we were to read just the conclusions of each chapter, that would be a starting point.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I run into a lot, so it seems like the plastics industry, whenever they want to challenge this, they'll go to the LCAs and the product carbon footprints, all that stuff, which is the best way to check whether or not one thing is better than the other.
Right.
But every time I have that conversation with plastics detractors, they'll say something like, well, that's truncated. I don't trust your data.
Yeah.
And then I'll say, well, we are taking into effect taking methane leakage at the well head all the way through. It is the traditional process, and it's been third-party certified.
Yeah.
But they still don't believe it, and they think that we're out to get them.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's so frustrating to me because I'm not out to get you. I'm trying to make the world at least a smaller amount better on a daily basis. That's all I want to do.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, LCA is the only thing accepted by governments and NGOs and companies. It's the only method we have. So if you throw it out, nothing's perfect, right? But it's 99% there. It's been honed over decades, and you have to check it as well. You have to get it externally checked. So it really works. If you throw that away, you're down to using a magic 8-ball, right? Or tossing a coin, which would be really, really dumb. So when people say, you didn't include this in an LCA, or basically what they're saying is it doesn't give me the answer I want to hear, and therefore I'm just going to dismiss it. And that's really pathetic. I mean, that is really copping out on your children's future. Think about that. This is not a joke. This is not something that has no consequences. You're making the planet worse for future generations and wasting your money doing it on more expensive alternatives. So those people really should be ashamed of themselves for coming up with, you hear all kinds of things. You see it online. People say, oh, we can't trust a plastic science to tell us about the science of plastics. You're like, well, that's an interesting analogy. So you go to the doctor, you got a heart attack, and you go to the hospital and you say, oh, let me go and get the cardiologist. No, I want to speak to the cleaner. I don't trust anybody in the medical industry to tell me about medicine. I mean, that's literally it. It's like, that's how desperate these people are to cling to the lies that they believe now, and that's unfortunate. But let's not make the mistake of talking about plastics all day long either, because when I look at everything, I look at waste, materials, litter, greenhouse gas, fossil fuel use, microplastics, all of these things. No matter which topic I've looked at, plastic is less than 1% of impact, and so that's really the biggest message here. The more time we spend talking about plastic, which is less than 1% of materials and waste and all the rest of it, the less chance we've got of really making a better future, right? If you're a problem solver, even if you're dumb, you can understand that there's no way to avoid 99% of something and focus on 1% and ever make any real progress. Imagine I told my kids to tidy the house and they went and cleaned the cutlery drawer and said, "I'm done, Dad. That's going to make all the difference." I'd say, no, that's cleaning the cutlery drawer and tidying the knives and forks is never going to cut it. But that's what we're doing. We're rearranging our cutlery all day long when we talk about plastics. And it's just a huge I'm not saying it doesn't have an impact, but it's less than 1%. And as long as we ignore the 99, we will fail.
And I think you would agree, we want to keep plastics out of the environment when they are getting in the environment. Like you'd mentioned the fines, and I think the other big issue, so whenever you have actual packaging plastics getting into the environment, it's a lot of mismanaged waste in island nations that don't even have trash collection, let alone recycling. And that stuff ends up in the environment. It gets into a stream, ends up in the ocean, then it washes back on the beach. And they're like, look at all of this plastic. Like, that's all your plastic
that you dumped
from your beach.
That's right.
Like from your people. Stop them from doing that, and then you won't have that problem anymore. But you can't cut through that messaging because people see the picture, right? And they see plastics everywhere, and they just assume that whenever I say things like, hey, we need to recycle more, they're like, well, you're just trying to get the focus off of what really matters, is that stuff on the beaches. I was like, no, I really do want to recycle more.
I'm glad you brought that up, Justin, because if I look at every single one of these topics, plastic is less than 1% of material. So there's no way that people can be upset about plastic for being 0.5% of all the material we use. It doesn't make sense. If they were worried about materials usage, they would be talking about metal, wood, and concrete. That's 99%. So they can't be really upset about materials usage. That's an invalid claim. Same with waste. Same with microplastics, same with fossil fuel usage, same with greenhouse gas, all of them. Plastic are insignificant. The only thing that actually is a valid claim is that there's a lot of plastic litter. But then you have to ask yourself, why is there plastic litter? And the reason is it's the greenest, cheapest option, the best option for packaging many times. 9 times out of 10, if you replace plastic packaging or plastic in general, you increase harm. So the reason that we see a lot of that litter is that it's good for that. It's cheap for that, right? So it's not the fault of the plastic per se. And you have to ask yourself 2 questions. Did the material cause the litter? And the answer is, unless you're really, incapable of logic, the answer is no. And I've actually asked people to do this. Take something made of plastic, go out, because they refuse to believe that people cause litter, right? And I say, do this experiment. Go out in your garden, pick something made of plastic, drop it on the floor, and turn around and blame that company or blame that material. And come back here and type on LinkedIn and tell me what a fool you feel. Because no adult could possibly drop that on the floor at their own feet and then blame the material. If you do, you're certifiable. You should go and get some serious mental help, right? So, and yet people are so determined to cling to this idea that materials are causing litter, and they don't. And this is interesting because it's not just an opinion, right? Scientists have watched thousands and thousands of littering events. Over 80% of the time, it's dropped intentionally by the person. It's not accidentally leaking into the environment. People are dropping it on purpose, and rather than blame themselves, they want to blame the company or the litter or anything else. They'll blame the the zodiac signs if they could. But that's one thing. And then the second thing is, what would happen if we didn't have plastic? What happened if we have paper or metal or glass? So if we use that kind of material, and the answer is you end up with 4 times more waste and 4 times more litter, right? So things will be worse. So there's a couple of things going on there that blaming plastic is unjust, and people are forgetting to say, what are the alternatives, and how would things be if we didn't have plastic? And the answer is much, much worse.
Yeah. You'd mentioned a couple things there. First off was the Global Plastics Treaty, the 5.2. And then the other thing that you had mentioned was the 1% of all materials. So the one thing I get all the time from plastic detractors is the exponential growth of plastics needs to be stopped. We have to stop it at the source. We have to turn off the spigot in order to solve for problems. And you have a chart in your book where you show the growth of all materials and how plastics are growing at the same scale or at the same rate as the economy.
Yes.
What do people say to that when you bring that up to them?
Yeah, they don't really have a good response. And I'm glad you brought that particular graph up. So it shows that every material is growing at 3 or 4%. Concrete, metal, glass, aggregates, everything paper, everything's growing at 3 or 4%. So to say that plastics are bad for doing the exact same thing that every other material is doing is just ridiculous. And it's really apparent on that graph. In fact, I was recently in Mexico and I visited the Minister for the Environment of Mexico, a lovely woman called Alicia. And she's like 70 years old. She's a career politician, but she's a scientist by training. And when I showed her that graph, she said, oh, I get it. Plastic is the least of our worries. Because you have this graph of all this material we're using, and plastic is one pixel on this graph, and the rest of it is being completely ignored. I said, look, you're a professional politician, you're a scientist. Replacing plastic, it means more greenhouse gas, which is the opposite of what we want, and we're never going to make a difference. If you're a politician, you want to make some policies that will really have an impact, let's look at the rest of this thing and let's make a difference together. And so I give her a lot of respect because she responded to evidence. And I hope that we have more politicians in the world who are capable of looking at some data, peer-reviewed, solid data, backed by citations, and saying, hey, yeah, we're obsessing over something that doesn't really make a difference here. Apart from the litter issue, and that is down to people, and education, deposits, and fines is the way of making litter stop. And we know that for a fact. We've got data on it.
So when you go up to these detractors that are cherry picking the data and they're showing this, it looks like a huge hockey stick of growth of plastic. Without context, it does look outrageous. It does look like we're growing like crazy. But then when you put it up against everything else, then you contextualize it, and then you can make rational, solid decisions, which is not typically something that the UN Global Plastics Treaty folks are that concerned about, making rational decisions.
No, that's right. I mean, you mentioned litter and nets, which is a great thing to bring up because this whole treaty is based on the idea that the ocean's choking in plastic. But they looked at the total amount and it's incredibly low. It's much lower than 1,000 times lower than Jambeck had in her famous misguided guess. So there is no choking on plastics. It's just nonsense. And when you do look at what's there, because they go and sample this gyre, right? They pick this area where the plastic concentrates. There's almost zero in the rest of the ocean, by the way. Nobody ever talks about that. They only talk about the one area where it, or the areas where it swirls around and collects, right? Because there's more there. So that's the only area they talk about, the gyres. So they went and there is no floating island of plastic.
No, you can't see anything. It looks like open ocean.
Right. There's nothing there. There's never been a picture of it in the history of the world. It doesn't show up on a satellite. So anyway, they go to these things, they take a sample and they measure what's in it. And if people think that it's litter and consumer items like bottles and bags and straws, but it isn't. If you add up bottles, bags, and straws, it's 0.03% by weight of ocean plastic. So it's already a low amount, incredibly low, and 0.03% is bottles, plastics, and straws. And not shown to cause any harm at all. There's no study showing any harm to wildlife from it because the amounts are so small. But what's harming wildlife, ironically, is nets, which is up to 85% is discarded fishing nets and fishing gear. It's harming whales, it's harming turtles, it's harming birds, it's harming fish. That is the majority, the huge majority. And this United Nations Inc. 5 thing plans to completely ignore what causes a harm and is the vast majority and obsess over the tiny, tiny fraction that is not shown to cause any harm whatsoever. And that shows you how disingenuous and incompetent these people are. They literally should be, they're flying in tens of thousands of these people again and again and again to talk about an emergency that they made up so that they can go on holiday somewhere nice. It's really shocking to watch. I went to one of the events and all the green groups show up in their Escalades and you try and talk science to them and show them some facts and they have no interest. They're like, oh, here I am in a swanky hotel having a great time in my driving around in my Escalade.
Yeah, the carbon impact of just one of those, and we're now on, it's going to be number 6 of people flying in from all over the world. You pretty much negated anything that you were trying to solve just by the private air travel alone.
Yeah, that's why I never went again. Somebody asked me to go to that one, which I did on my own dime, by the way. I wasn't paid. And the impact of my flights, I calculated when I got home, was 10,000 PET bottles, which is more than I will use in my whole lifetime, just to go and talk about an emergency that doesn't exist. And if you imagine that there's 5 or 10,000 people going to each of these things, like you said, 6 times, it's more impact than you can possibly ever reduce by having the talks in the first place. It's absolutely negligent.
And we've got this thing called Teams.
Yeah,
that
right.
works pretty well.
Yeah, like we're doing, right? We're doing it virtually. I didn't fly to your house to have this conversation.
Somebody was getting on my case, like, hey, you should do like an actual studio show. It's like, no, I don't want people traveling to do these things. And first off, I don't want to schedule that. I'm not going to go through all that effort. Yeah. But then I don't want people flying around just to have a discussion we can do like this. Why does that make any sense?
The number of people on LinkedIn who say, "Hey, you think that there's no litter on the beach? You should fly to where are they?
Yeah.
They're always
Plastic Bank,
Bali. Fly to Bali, and I'll show it to you." I'm like, I never denied it's there. For one thing, I've literally got study after study of beach litter in my book and in my post, so I never denied it. So they're telling a lie straight away, and they want me to come and fly and look at it. I'm like, I know what the data is.
You showed me the pictures.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures. I've got the data here on my laptop. Let me send you a study for free for almost no impact.
And the amount of times I see people say, well, we found articles and items from all over the world on this beach. Like, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
That's just patently false.
Yeah.
And if somebody has something to prove me wrong on that, by all means, send it my way. But I haven't seen it.
Yeah, the data shows that the litter on the beach comes almost exclusively from the people on the beach. That's a scientific fact. There's plenty of studies on that, and they can tell that because the litter you find on a beach is specific to that area, right? You can prove that it's from that region. There are isolated islands, and this is in the new book, where they find a lot of litter on the beach, even though there's no people around. And then they say, oh, look, it must be coming from the ocean. And they studied what is that litter. And there are a lot of PET bottles there. And they looked at the date codes on those PET bottles. And they found out that there's no way that they could have come from land. They were dumped by vessels. So again, we're down to the fishing industry and the shipping industry being negligent and just throwing their stuff in the ocean. And that's what's causing the problem with the nets. The bottles that you do find are coming mainly from in this case, it was Chinese vessels. And so they literally studied the ocean currents and said, there's no way this bottle could have got here from anywhere on land. It's impossible. And so again, we're placing the blame wrongly, and that means we'll never solve the problem. Yeah.
So you already jumped into the next discussion I wanted to have, which is the garbage patch, the gyres.
Yeah.
But I always see the photoshopped image of the landfill that's been superimposed on the ocean.
Yeah.
And I always just crack up every time I see that. And there was actually a video that Business Insider did, which I think was pretty level-headed.
Okay.
Some of the stuff that they did at the end wasn't all that great, but you should probably check that one out. But I want to get into media in all of this and why it seems like everybody collectively believes that there's an island of trash that you can walk across.
Right.
You already mentioned that.
Right.
Why do we think that? Why do people think that? Where is this coming from? And what is the role of media in this whole discussion?
There's a whole PhD thesis on that by Kim DeWolf, and she looked into the myth of the floating island of plastic, how it came to be, and she interviewed like the guy who found the gyre, right? What was his name? Is it Captain Moore? I think it's Captain Moore. So she looked into this whole legend and how it came to be. So I think it was a German magazine wrote an article years ago describing a carpet of waste and plastic. And then the Russian newspaper Pravda translated that into mountain. So it was a mistranslation of the carpet. Suddenly it became a mountain, and they put a picture of a mountain and they published that article. And ironically, Pravda means truth in Russian. So it was anything but truth. It was just complete nonsense. But it captured
that's an oxymoron.
Yeah.
Truth in journalism.
I know.
Russia.
So that captured people's imagination, and they're still talking about it now, even though it's not a thing. And like I said, you can find a cigarette packet on a satellite picture. That's the resolution of a military satellite. And they haven't found this floating island the size of Texas, right? Never. And they asked this captain to go and, the media go every day to him. And he says, I could be rich. Every day they say, take me out there on your boat. I want to take some pictures for my newspaper. And he said, there's nothing there. It's just open ocean. You don't even see anything. You can swim through it and not even know you're in it. You can sail through it. You don't even know you're in it because it's just areas with a tiny bit more plastic than the rest of the ocean. It has almost no plastic. So it's about, I think the maximum concentration I once calculated was like 1 Monopoly die per Olympic pool of water. That's the highest concentration anywhere, which is too much, right? It shouldn't be there.
Yeah,
but
agreed.
It's not choking the ocean. It's just that's just a lie. So that's how it came to be. The media grabbed a hold of something, mistranslated it, and drew a picture, and pictures speak louder than words.
Yeah. And you've talked in the past, and I think we've even discussed this on the previous episode, but I think it's valuable. The fact that people don't trust media, but yet they seem to be blindly following the media in most everything. I don't even think it's just a plastics thing. I think it's sensational headlines sell. Yeah. To your point earlier of when you look at it from an NGO trying to get donations, the same thing applies to selling newspapers or getting clicks.
Yeah.
The more sensational, the more negative your headline, the more likely it is somebody's going to look at it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. They're just out to get clicks.
Yeah. So what do you think about, and maybe just walk through a little bit your findings on trust in media and how quickly the people are to follow?
Yeah. I actually start the book with that because people have opinions based on what the media have told them. So the book starts off with trust in mainstream media is at an all-time low. That's a scientifically measured fact. And then ask yourself, okay, no sensible person trusts everything they read in the media. You'd have to be incredibly gullible to do that, right? So you ask people, do you trust the media? They say no. And then you say, where is 100% of the information you believe now about plastics coming from? And they're like, oh, the media. And you go, so maybe you should just put that aside for a second and see what scientists say, right? Because trust in scientists is much higher than it is in the media. And it took a blow during COVID, but there's a lot of good scientists out there doing good science. And so people are like, oh yeah, you're right. Everything I do believe now. Because you can say to them, you may not believe me, but how many studies have you read? How many peer-reviewed studies have you read? And the answer is, of course, 0, right? Are you a trained scientist? How many peer-reviewed studies have you read? People are so keen to have a defined, vehement opinion about things, and yet they've never read a single study in their life. They're just like playing a game of Chinese whispers where you believe some garbled message from the person who whispered it to you. So that's unfortunate. And what's even worse than that is that scientists prove that the media are lying to us. So if you take microplastics, the scientific consensus is that there's no danger. If you look at all the studies, the big majority say, no proven danger, nothing to worry about. And that's what the FDA says as well. It's not a new threat either. We have 50 years of study showing no danger. And now you look at what the media are telling us, 93% of media articles say that they're definitely dangerous. When the scientists are saying they're not.
I see the big C thrown in there a lot.
Yeah.
It's human cancer.
Yeah. Yeah, no evidence for it. It's nonsense. You know what does give you cancer is breathing in dust from dirt. So quartz gives you cancer, and farmers can get it from breathing in just the dirt that they're tilling up. And wood dust causes cancer. So if you were really worried about cancer from dust, you would ban trees, but I don't see anyone doing that. So that's a logical thought process that they're applying to plastics. Plastic is an incredibly small part of dust we ingest. One recent study said it's 100,000th of the particles we're ingesting, and it's non-toxic. So anyone who's worried about 100,000th of something that doesn't accumulate and is non-toxic, and not the stuff that actually is poisonous. I mean, we got spores from all kinds of horrible spores, bacteria. We got lead, we got arsenic, we got tin in the dust, we got quartz that causes cancer, we got wood dust that causes cancer. We've got innumerable actual toxic things at much higher concentrations, and no one's interested in any of them. They just want to talk about the tiny, tiny fraction of something that's not even an issue. So that's really silly.
So in my day job, I've been fighting with legislators in multiple states about bans of EPS food service packaging. And the conversation always comes back to toxicity of styrene and microplastics.
Yep.
And you and I, we've already discussed the microplastic side of things, but the scientific illiteracy and not understanding that styrene on its own can be dangerous. It is a carcinogen, but once it's polymerized, it becomes inert, and the residual styrene in EPS and polystyrene is minimal.
Yeah.
Nobody can seem to get that. And I see a lot of people say, hydrogen, dangerous, oxygen can be dangerous. But when you put them together, you've got water, and it's completely inert and it's safe. But nobody seems to understand these things. So why do you think these things persist?
Yeah.
Why do you think these thoughts? And because I guess like the microplastics article, or the one that kind of kicked all this off with the breaking the brain barrier, I think it was a University of New Mexico study, if I'm not mistaken. That was peer reviewed, right? Like that study had to have been peer reviewed to get into, I think it was in Nature or something like that. How does it pass that? Like, how does it get through that process? And then why is it persisting?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, nobody's reading these studies properly, right? And that's what I've been doing. I've been reading the experimental part, and it's really boring. I don't know if you've ever read the experimental part.
And I've tried, and it's rough.
It's horrible. It's horrible. It's like
Yeah.
reading patents. That's also torture. But I actually read these studies and say, how did they do it? And all the studies, and it's not just me that's saying this, 80 to 90% of microplastic studies are not valid because they made really basic mistakes in the science. So, for example, that one with the brain barrier, they made really fundamental mistakes. They used a type of plastic that does not exist anywhere in the environment, and nobody and no animal has ever been exposed to it. So they say it's crossing the brain barrier, but it wasn't human brains, it was mice brains. And they used 1 million times too much of it. So, which means the study's garbage, you can throw it in the trash. And they used a type of plastic which is specially made in the lab that has special properties that no actual plastic that we're exposed to has. So you can throw it in the trash can for that as well. And they use another thing that they do wrong, like that one with a spoonful of plastic in the brain, which I debunked on the same page. If you go to Phantom Plastics, there's a whole page about this plastic in the brain nonsense. They used a method that doesn't work. There's literally scientists saying you cannot use this method to detect plastic in the brain because it detects other things and tells you it's plastic. The method does not work. And that's the method that they used. It's called pyrolysis GC mass spec. It detects lipids, which are supposed to be in your brain. We know that. We know that there's supposed to be a spoonful of lipids in your brain. Your brain needs it to work. It detects lipids and then says, hey, it's plastic. And that's why you shouldn't use that method. And that's what other scientists have said. And they're like, hey, let's use this method that doesn't work and then scare the bejesus out of everyone. It's really stupid. It's incompetent. And I'm really fed up with these people who are making scientific careers and getting millions of dollars in funding by scaring people instead of by doing their job, which is to do proper science and present it in a balanced way.
Yeah, it's rough. Like it's rough out here because I'm having the same conversation over and over and over again with people that are in charge of making market altering decisions for states, and who they're listening to is the Sierra Club, Ocean Conservancy, Plastic Bank, all of these people. Yeah, and it's like, why are you choosing them as your source? Yeah, like what bona fides do they have that prove to you that they know what they're talking about outside of they're out there and they're against plastics? That's all you know about them. Yeah. You don't know whether or not they have scientists on the books. You don't know what's going on.
I checked that. A lot of them don't even have scientists. They're just big PR machines. Yeah. They make up stories to get money. To your point, though, I run into the opposite problem. I have limited access to policymakers. I have no political agenda. I have no political party. But I do believe in giving these people, the ones who actually do care, access to facts. And that's part of the reason that the council exists. It's a bunch of unpaid, famous professors sharing the science for free. There's no agenda there. It's just show them the science. And I've had really good success when I have met policymakers, but I have no access to them. And here's the funny thing. The plastics industry associations keep promising to fly me into Washington, and then they don't. They literally promise to fly me in. And then I see a big shiny picture on LinkedIn. Hey, we're flying into Washington. Here we are meeting with the people. And yeah, but none of you have the facts. You're wasting an opportunity to show them the science. And so they make promises to me to make a difference, to show the politicians the facts. And then they forget to take me. It's happened again and again and again. And it's like, what are you guys doing? In fact, I saw a thing where the head of the Plastics Industry Association was in front of Congress, and Beyond Plastics was telling, just saying things which were totally rubbish. Typical. I mean, literally just nonsense. And the best that they could come up with is, oh, leave us alone. We employ a lot of people. That was like his argument. And I'm like, I had literally shared the science with the head of the PIA and said, here, spend 20 minutes, learn the facts. Next time you're in front of Congress, you'll have the facts at your hand. And he didn't do it. And he just came up with this lame argument that we employ people. And I mean, I always joke that drugs and prostitution employs a lot of people too, but it doesn't make it a great idea, right? And so it's such a lame argument. The argument for plastic is that in 9 times out of 10, it reduces global warming. It is the least impactful solution. It's reducing waste and it's saving people money. Why should people be paying extra for things that make things worse just because they didn't have access to the truth? And so that's really unfortunate. The people who are paid astonishing amounts of money to know the politicians, to get in front of them, have regular appointments, and still they're letting us down and not sharing the truth. And that's covered in the book too, the people who've let us down.
And I know you're a scientist and you approach these issues from a scientific perspective, which is why you've got the Research Council out there to do some of the marketing side of things. But do you find people are open to scientific discussions on this front? Because in my experience, telling stories and narratives cut through some of this anti-plastic messaging in the current culture better than the science discussion? What do you think to that?
It's a combination, and that's why it's so hard, because you have to have the science. That's why I have a book. Not everyone's going to read a book, but you have a book with 200 studies you can point at to say, this is not a joke. This is backed by serious science, professors all around the world. And then you have to take that science, distill it down, and make it into a story with a nice picture. And that's why I've got 1.5 million views on LinkedIn, because I'm able to take complicated science, distill it down into a sentence or two with a picture that people can resonate with. And this has been quoted in the Canadian Parliament. They were talking about Bill C-380, and Leanne Rood, the Shadow Minister, brought up my first book and said, this is a great book, you need to look at this. As I said, the Minister for the Environment of Mexico was receptive. So the people I approach, I've talked to Rob Portman, for example, former senator, and the people I approach, I'm having great success with, but I just don't have access. And the people who do have access are... I've heard that the reason that they don't tell the truth and they don't use their lobbyists that people are paying for, are not really getting the facts across, is that the job of a lobbyist, I've been told, is to be friends with everyone, not to I'm a relentless truth teller, right? I don't care if people like me or not. I'm there to tell you the facts, whether or not you want to hear it. Whereas these people, it's their job to schmooze with people. They've got to be friends with all of these people through one government, through another government. That is their career, not to make enemies, but not to say what's true.
Yeah, I think the other side of it is you got what's going on in California with the lawsuit against Exxon. You've got there was a county in Kansas that has no impact on anybody, but they're suing multiple plastics manufacturers. So there's this concern of fighting back. There's a concern about making any kind of public statement, because if you make a public statement, maybe that's going to come back and bite you and you're going to get sued. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of this, is everybody's just afraid to rattle the cage of an NGO. Like, I've never heard a single plastics person challenge Judith Henk at Beyond Plastics.
Right.
But what are her bona fides? Like, what does she know?
No.
Like, is she a scientist? No, she was a bureaucrat.
Yeah, she was
like she worked for the EPA.
Yeah.
That's my understanding. I don't know. Is she a scientist? I've never seen.
I was never able to determine that either, but whatever.
Yeah, I have no clue. Why it is that people seem to listen to her. And nothing against her personally. I don't know her. But I'm just saying, why is everybody so quick to listen to that and nobody wants to challenge it? And I think it's lawsuits is a big part of it. People don't want to get involved in any kind of tort case or anything.
Well, Greenpeace just lost a huge one, wasn't it? 600 million or some, and this is what I've been hoping for, because they went out, they did things which they shouldn't have done, and they were held accountable, and there should be more of that. If people, it doesn't matter whether, if you're doing something wrong, you should be held accountable, and that's the way it works. Yeah. And I'm an expert witness, so people have actually, because I have the data, right? I have the evidence, and so I've been doing that. I helped 9,000 women get settlements when plastic was put in their body when it never should have been. So I'm not pro-plastic. I'm pro-truth. In that case, the plastic was the wrong choice, shouldn't have been used, and that's what I said in court. And the same thing when it comes to some of these lawsuits you just mentioned. People are coming to me and saying, "Hey, Chris, you've got more data on this than anyone in the world. Help to share some of that and dispel some of these accusations, which are just not true." So yeah, that's happening right now.
So the book is going to publish as we're recording this, which is the 21st. It's going to publish tomorrow, the 22nd, which is Earth Day.
Right.
And then anybody can go to your website and get it, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Do you want to plug the actual website so people know how to get to it?
Yeah, so it's at phantomplastics.com. That's my main website where my actual business is. As I said, the environment stuff is not my actual business. My actual business is solving scientific problems. So it's there. And this hobby of mine to correct myths that my kids were told has turned into a second job now. But anyway, my main business is just being a scientist. That's my main website. And I don't sell or market plastics. And before somebody says I'm trying to sell more plastic, I don't sell or market plastic. I'm just a scientist. Go to Phantom Plastics. You can see about microplastics in the brain. You'll see Shattering the Plastics Illusion. And it's there as a lovely reader, right? So you can turn the pages and read it. And
it looks great.
Yeah, it's free for everyone, and you can download it too. And I'm going to put it up electronically because that's the lowest impact way of doing it. And also I want to see if there's any last typos that somebody catches before I send it off to the printer. And it's already been translated to Portuguese. So somebody said, "Hey, I loved your first book." They translated that into Portuguese, and they've arranged it for this one. It's also coming in German, French, and Spanish. And that's the funny thing about writing this book, right? The first one I wrote just because I was angry my kids were lied to, and I wasn't expecting anyone to read it. And then I was shocked when people did read it, and now I wasn't expecting anyone to read it. And I have a following of people who do care about truth. And so I was able to put a bit more effort into the second book and make it even more comprehensive. And it's totally rewritten. Really, it's the most definitive book of science on this topic. It covers, and it's the only book that covers all the subjects. Anybody who says that they're an ESG, or they're planning on going to Inc., or they want to talk to UNEP or a policymaker, those people need to read this, or they really shouldn't be in that meeting.
Yeah. And we'll put the link in the show notes so everybody can get access to it. Any other topics that you wanted to cover today that we haven't covered so far?
No, I think we really covered it all. It's just be careful about what people are telling you who have a donate now button next to their more plastic than fish in the sea, or a credit card of plastic a week. It's just all fiction.
And you're 70% more likely to share negative news stories on social media.
Yeah, that means negative stories are infinitely more likely, if you think about the sequence of events, infinitely more likely to go viral than the truth, because they're more exciting and more shared. That's exactly right. So you don't have to read all the science. I've done it for you. But all you have to remember is plastic is less than 1% of anything you'll ever measure, pretty much. And focusing on that is just not a path to success. Let's start making a difference by focusing on things that really matter, like flying less, driving less, and eating less meat. Those are three things that make a big impact, much, much more than talking about straws all day will do.
Yeah. And then on the book, though, you do cite all of the different, if somebody wants to go down a rabbit hole, they can check out all the different studies that you have as well. If somebody wants to go down that same path. I don't know why they would.
I listed a bunch of them on the page. And also, everything I cite is literally copied and pasted from the conclusion of the study, right? So there's no spin, there's no Chris's interpretation of it. It's literally the words of the author again and again and again, hundreds of times. So it's totally indisputable. And it's not cherry picking either. I mean, I really show the consensus opinion, and that's why I had to read so much. So I'm hoping that this is really a turning point in history where people start making wise choices based on stuff that's true.
I don't have a lot of faith in humanity, so I'm not gonna. I can't join you in those rosy glasses yet, but I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope eventually people will start to look at things rationally, will stop letting emotion drive these conversations. Yeah, but we've got a long way to go before we get there, right?
People are allowing the passion to come before the truth. So there is a time for passion, right? People are passionately against plastic, but they're basing it on stuff which is pure fiction, and so they're actually making things worse. So the people with the passion need to hold back, make sure they're right, make sure they've actually checked the facts, and then go forward, right, with that passion based on something that's really true and substantiated. So hopefully we can have a little bit more of that in the future.
Yeah, there's always hope.
Yeah, there's always hope.
It's the hope that keeps you alive.
Yeah.
Dr. Chris DeArmitt, thank you so much. Everybody check out the book, Shattering the Plastics Illusion. I've already read it. It's great. It's good to have on hand if you get into a debate. But thank you so much for your second appearance on the show.
Thank you, Justin. And let's crusade for truth, whether people want to hear it or not.
I know, and I'm going to keep doing it because I don't know any better.
Yeah, that's right.
I think I'm a glutton for punishment at this point. But once again, this has been the Redefining Plastics Podcast. My name's Justin Riney. Thanks to Dr. Chris DeArmitt, and everybody have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Justin.
You want to learn more about the plastics industry, recycling, check out these other videos, please like and subscribe.